Hello.
All yours.
Hello, Deb. Nice to talk to you again.
Nice to talk to you. Nice to meet you. Nice to see everybody. Mazel tov to the outgoing, the incoming, and all the nice people who drive our boat. Anshe Torah. It is an honor, and I thank you very much for you guys asking me to moderate this evening. A longtime Anshe Torah member. It is my honor to always spread the good word in many ways about our congregation and its people. And I'm also a community reporter for a number of papers and magazines, including almost 2,000 articles to the TJP in the last 18 years. In the last year, when I thought it would be very quiet, I've had 250 pieces. So it has not been quiet. And thank God most of that has been really good news, happy news, and lots of good news.
I can turn to that.
So hopefully you all read it. Chief Ed Drain started his law enforcement career with the Plano Police Department in 1994. He worked in patrol, the neighborhood police unit, and traffic investigations. He also served on the SWAT team and the bomb squad. He progressed through the ranks as sergeant, lieutenant, and captain. In 2006, Chief Drain was appointed as the assistant police chief, a position he held for 10 years. During that time, Chief Drain managed all operational areas of the department, including patrol services, criminal investigations, and support services. From June 2015 to September 2015, Chief Drain served as interim chief for the Murphy Police Department while still employed with the Plano Police Department. Maybe that means good news. They were both very quiet and things were not. In July of 2016, Chief Drain was appointed interim chief for the Amarillo Police Department. In October of that year, he was formally selected as police chief for the Amarillo Police Department. In February 2020, we won. Chief Drain returned to Plano and has since served as our police chief. He is a graduate of the Institute for Law Enforcement Administration, School of Police Supervision, and the School of Executive Leadership. He is a graduate of the FBI National Academy and certified by the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement as an instructor and master peace officer. Chief Drain has a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice from UT Arlington, a certification in public management from UTD, and an MBA from Amberton University. Chief, welcome to Anshe Torah, to our Anshe family, and to our community. And thank you for leading an amazing group of men and women who take care of us.
Thank you, Deb.
Would you like to share something with us before we have some lovely Q&A? And if anybody has questions that didn't submit them, please do so in the chat and I will add them to our list.
Well, you know, I know that we've got a lot of questions that folks have provided to Deb, but what I wanted to do is just kind of give you a quick update on where we are with the police department, something that I do with most groups that I speak with. And, you know, our mission statement is to provide outstanding police services in partnership with the community to provide a safe environment that contributes to the quality of life. And so how do we know whether we meet our mission statement? And we do that by utilizing 4 performance measures. One of those is our crime rate, one is traffic safety, one is the quality of our service, and then the other one is the responsiveness of our service. And so on our crime rate, how are we doing? So of course, we're looking at 2020 data. And in 2020, our overall crime rate, well, what we look at with our crime rate, there are 4 offenses. There are 4 violent crimes and 4 property crimes. The 4 violent crimes are murders, aggravated assaults, sexual assaults, and robberies. The 4 property crimes are larceny. That's when someone breaks into your car or something and steals something. So it's larceny, it's burglary, it's auto theft, and arson. So you put those 8 crimes together. When you see different articles or you see online apps where they compare one neighborhood or one city to the other one based on their crime, that's typically the 8 offenses that they're using. We collect that data, we send it in every month to the Texas Department of Public Safety, which collects the data across the state, and then DPS in turn sends that data off to the FBI, and then that's how we determine what the crime rate is. And so for our crime rate in 2020, overall crime was down. Crime was down about 2% last year in 2020, but our violent crime was up about 5%. Of course, we have a lot more violent crimes than we do. We have a lot more property crimes than we do violent crimes. So even though the violent crime was up slightly, we did see an overall decrease in our crime rate. So the next item that we have is our traffic safety. And for that, we look at all crashes, we look at crashes with injuries, and of course, we look at our fatalities. And 2020 was an anomaly when it comes to traffic safety. We had a 36% decrease in our traffic crashes last year, and I'm sure a lot of you can probably understand why. In 2020, we had a lot less traffic volume on our roadways. So it wasn't anything so much that the police department was doing. We just had fewer people driving, and that reduced our crashes. However, in 2019, we only had 7 people that died in traffic crashes in Plano. In 2020, we had 17 people die in traffic crashes in Plano. That's compared to 3 homicides that we had. Actually, we only had 2 homicides, and 1 was a manslaughter. So we have a lot more people that die on our roadways than we do from people actually going out and trying to murder someone. Now, why do we have so many traffic crashes in Plano? And actually, we saw the same trend across the state. There were fewer people driving on the roadways, but the people who were driving at much higher speeds. We had several crashes where people were driving 80, 90 miles per hour with multiple people in the vehicles, and that contributed to those numbers that we saw. So hopefully we can keep the crashes down and the overall crashes down in 2021 and not see our traffic fatalities go up so high. We're doing pretty good in traffic fatalities so far this year. I think we're at only 2 so far, which isn't bad for this time of year. The other performance measure that we look at is our response times. And our goal with our response time, just for all calls for service, is to be there within 8 minutes. That's an aggregate number. We're not going to, every single call is not going to be there in 8 minutes, but when we go through our computer-aided dispatch system and we get the aggregate of those calls, and we do about 100,000 calls a year, we want that number to be below 8 minutes. And then for our priority calls, our priority 1 calls, which are emergency calls, we want that to be below 5 minutes. And we were actually just under 7 minutes. We were like 6 minutes and some change for all calls, and about 3 minutes and some change for our emergency calls. In fact, those are the best response times in the history of the police department. And again, part of that is due to the fact that we had fewer cars on the roadway. And so the guys and gals could get to those calls a lot faster than they could previously when there's so much traffic out there. So we're responding to calls pretty well. And then the final performance measure that we have is the quality of our service. And we do that by doing a survey. We send it out to all the zip codes. And for years we did it by paper. This year, though, I asked the staff to see if they could use SurveyMonkey, and we did get a much higher response this year. And we use a kind of a Likert scale, 5-point Likert scale. The top 2 are good, the middle is neutral, the bottom 2 are bad, and pretty much even when we were doing it with paper, about 95, 96% of the people give us the top 2 ratings on that. Now, of course, people say, well, Chief, you guys are grading yourself. Of course, you're going to give yourself an A. But the city itself, though, brings in an outside consultant every year. One year, this consulting firm will survey residents in the city. The next year, they will survey businesses. The last survey that was done was in 2019. I don't think we've gotten the 2020 results yet. In 2019, that group gave us 92% of the people were satisfied with the police services. The only department, and they do all departments across the city, the only department that was higher than us that year was the fire department. They were at 96%. But I go back and I look at those reports because the city has been bringing in this outside consulting firm for a number of years. It switches, the next year they'll do businesses, and we're always at like 96%, and then the fire department is around 92, 93%. So I'm hoping to beat the fire department on this next one since they surveyed businesses. Yeah, so we do pretty well. But the other thing from that survey that ITC does, the consulting firm, is they show what the mean is for just all the cities that they work for, that this consulting. In Plano, I mean, everything from Parks and Rec, you name the department, Plano is well above the ratings that other cities get. So not just in public safety, across the board, the city of Plano really does a good job, at least from the perspective of the citizens, of running this city. So those are the 4 performance measures that I wanted to talk to you guys about: our crime rate, our traffic safety, the responsiveness of our service, and the quality of our service. And I will take questions related to that or any other questions that any of the participants may have, Deb.
Okay. Well, we will start there. There has been a lot all around the country, all around. We have heard some things in our city, not necessarily Plano, I will say the Metroplex, and just wanting to talk a little bit about hate crimes, sadly, too many, from many countries, from many religions, against many people of all kinds, and including a lot of anti-Semitism, and just wanting to know if or that you are hearing of things in Plano in our area that people may not be aware of. I've heard, we had a program the other night and lots of kids talking about social media, and it's a whole new avenue, unfortunately, for people to get away with being unkind and mean, but be in person as well. If or that you're hearing anything and how we can respond or should respond.
No, well, we are, a hate crime, in Texas, there's not a law that's related to, we do have a hate crime provision in our law, but there's not a hate crime itself. So someone can commit assault where they hit or beat up somebody. They can commit, theft, robbery, criminal mischief where they damage their property. And if the reason they did that is because of someone's race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, age, some of those things, then it can be classified as a hate crime if the reason that they engaged in that criminal activity was because of that person's ethnicity or race or religion or whatever. And so, and we are required to track those separately from our other offenses, and we report those to the Texas Department of Public Safety separately. We had a handful of crimes that we believe were hate crimes in 2020. I don't recall that we had any that were related to people of Jewish heritage or background or religion. Since the Hamas and Israeli situation, and I'm glad that they have a ceasefire related to that, but we did a few days ago, we had a situation in one of our large gyms. We had a lady of Palestinian origin was shouting some things inside of the gym. She was confronted by a Jewish gentleman and on that deal, and we were called out. And what the health club decided to do was just criminal trespass both of them from the club because they were creating a disturbance. So there was no physical contact or anything like that. And as far as anything related to this most recent incident involving Hamas and Israel, I haven't heard of any other incidents in our city other than the one at the health club. What
is recommendation should somebody experience such an act, whether it's in person or online, if somebody's social media kids?
Well, if someone confronts you in person, they know that you're Jewish, or they come to your they come to your house of worship and they're causing you, by all means, call us. Even if they haven't committed any criminal acts, that's still a disturbing situation. But what we want to do is get there and try to de-escalate the situation so that it doesn't get out of hand. Like the one at the gym, without police intervention, it could have gotten out of hand. It turned out there were no criminal offenses involved, but we don't want to wait around for that. If we've got some kind of a disturbance because people are using slurs or, referring to religious slurs or whatever, referring to people, then yeah, we want to respond and get that situation de-escalated as quickly as we can. If it's something that's going on online, what I would recommend you do is get offline. I mean, just, don't engage with them, if it's on Facebook or Twitter or Nextdoor, and then just get off of that thread and don't even worry about it, so it's what I would recommend.
So you mentioned Nextdoor. I don't know that on Facebook it is as much, it may be, but my phone dings all day long. Sometimes I look at it, sometimes I don't, about Nextdoor. Has that become a friend or not so helpful necessarily to the police department? We had somebody say that they actually received a welfare check the other night at 2 a.m. Their dog started barking. They didn't hear the door, but the dogs had. And they opened the door and there was a gentleman and a woman, a police officer, saying they were there for a welfare check. They couldn't or didn't or wouldn't, I'm not sure what the terminology is, but report necessarily, they weren't able to answer the question, well, who would have called, or, you know, who was worried about us? We're fine and dandy. It was 2 a.m. And then it turns out the next day or so, there were 1 or 2 more of those same kinds of stories that were on Nextdoor. Number one, any thoughts about the concept of a 2 a.m. welfare check that is or isn't reported? How do we know for sure that that is the Plano PD coming and not maybe some bad guy or guys? And 2, how does Nextdoor and other social media, if others are engaging and helping or hurting?
Well, Nextdoor, we think overall Nextdoor is a very good tool. Nextdoor itself, the company, they do a good job of going in and monitoring things that are against their policies and removing them off. It's different than with Facebook, where we determine what our policies are, put those out there, and if people are violating that, then we remove them. Nextdoor does a really good job of doing that. They will just cut off threads if people are getting too nasty and all of those things without us even having to intervene and call us. So they do a good job in that regard. Our PIO here at the Plano Police Department, his name is Officer David Tilley, is very well known on Nextdoor. People tend to trust David when he says stuff. He checks up on things. In fact, after I spoke with you earlier today, I asked David to go in and go check and see if he could find those comments. He found something that he sent me that looks like it may be related to that, but he only found one thing that was on there that was like that. And but regarding late night welfare checks, typically when someone wants to do a welfare check on someone, it's a coworker, it's a relative, it's a friend. They haven't heard from the person didn't show up for something they were supposed to be at, they hadn't been at work in a couple of days. So we will respond to those. We'll go and go check on the person. Those could potentially be serious situations. If we go out on those, though, there is no reason why we shouldn't tell the person who we checked up on they're okay, on the reason why we are there. It's because your coworkers were concerned about you because you hadn't been at work in 2 days, or your sister in California was concerned about you because you guys talk every week and she hadn't heard from you in a while, or whatever the situation may be. So if we had someone who came out and they said, well, we can't tell you, that's not our policy. And some people should be suspicious of that. So how do you know the people that are coming to your home or the police? Well, I think probably most of our residents are probably familiar with our uniforms. We have a badge, a real badge, and typically our responding officers are going to be in a marked police car that they can look outside and see. But if there is any concern at all, before you open your door, call 911 and verify it. If that officer is at your house, our dispatchers are going to know about that call. So if you're not sure about why that officer is there, by all means, call 911.
Is 2 o'clock in the morning a typical time for a welfare check?
Well, yeah, no, we get welfare.
I mean, like overnight?
Yeah, we get them. Yeah, we get them overnight as well too. So, I mean, and quite frankly, there are a lot of welfare checks that we have checked on people, and they were in distress. Sometimes sometimes they've actually passed away. Sometimes they're in there. They've taken some medications or something, and we need to rush. Call EMS and get them to the hospital. So, so welfare checks are a legitimate call that we don't have any problems on going on at all. Our dispatchers are going to ask very probing questions of whoever calls to make sure this isn't, as best they can, that this isn't some kind of a sham and that we're disturbing people for nothing. But typically when we do a welfare check, we've got callback information on the other person, and that's actually a crime. So, or it could be a crime if someone calls in with information like that, knowing that it's false information. And we certainly will go back and file charges if we think that someone did that simply as a prank.
So the person who had called and told me about it happening at their home, should they be able to call? Is there an issue with them calling Plano PD and saying, we had a call on Tuesday at 2 a.m? Would you reveal who it was who called, or have that noted and be able to tell them whoever would have called in?
Right. Yeah. If it was a welfare check, then yeah, if they want to find out, they can just probably call our internal affairs unit, professional standards. We can go back and look into that call. And even if they don't have the service number, we can get the date and time and their address and pull it back up, assuming that it was something that was called in to the police department.
Right. Okay, thank you. So today's the anniversary of George Floyd's death, and I had somebody ask if Plano policing has changed at all in this last year. And if so, and if not, are there any changes that are being considered, or how is our police department any different than it was a year ago?
Well, probably not so much related to George Floyd. After George Floyd died, there were a lot of departments you saw where they announced they were changing their policy on chokeholds. They were changing their policies on a duty to intervene. And by that, they mean if one officer is going overboard with use of force or something, other officers on the scene need to intervene and stop that officer from doing that. Some of them, this wasn't related to George Floyd, but some of them also changed their policies on shooting at moving vehicles. We didn't have to change any of our policies related to that. We are what's called an accredited police department. We're accredited by the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, typically called CALEA. CALEA is the highest accreditation body in the United States. It's a national accreditation body. It's the only accreditation body nationally. There are some state ones. They've got the most standards, over 400, and most of those apply to things that are in your policies. But you can't just, to be a CALEA accredited, you just can't go put things in your policies and aha, we're done. You have to send them proofs that you are actually adhering to those policies. And then they come on site every 3 or 4 years and then actually ride out with officers, check your policies, they check your calls for service, they talk to residents, they talk to our federal partners, federal law enforcement partners, and make sure that you're doing that. So there are about 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States. There are only about 800 or 900 that have reached this level of accreditation. Now, there are some accreditation bodies that are of lower standard. Like, there are some that, I won't say lower, but they don't have as many standards that are at the state level. But at this national standard, that's the gold standard, and Plano has achieved that. And to be at that standard, we already have a lot of those things in the best practices are already in our policies already. So we didn't have to make a lot of policy changes following that tragic situation with George Floyd. Our officers already are not trained to put their knee on anybody's neck, period. I mean, we just don't do that. And the thing that's really tragic about the George Floyd situation, even forgetting about the knee on the neck, what we have been taught for at least 15 years that if you have to put someone on the ground, prone them out to put handcuffs on, and obviously that is the easiest way, as soon as you get those handcuffs on, you put them on their side, you put them on their butt, or you put them on their feet. You get them off of their stomach, because even without a knee on the neck, and if someone has been fighting with the police or running away from the police, and now you've got them in handcuffs, it's hard for them to breathe, and they're on their stomach, they could die anyway, even if you don't put a knee on their neck. That's why we're trying to immediately get them off of their stomach once we have them in handcuffs. And so that's why it's just amazing that Derek Chauvin would not only keep him on his stomach when he was no longer attempting to fight him or anything, and he had his knee on his neck at the same time. So bizarre situation.
Well, I and we all, I'm pretty sure, appreciate the humanity of our people, of your people.
Well, they're your people too.
I said our people and your people. And
there you go.
So, absolutely so. How does the new constitutional carry law change police training and procedures? Who are the people who are not qualified to conceal carry?
You said, who are the people that are not qualified?
But in capital letters, somebody said who are not qualified. I am not.
Oh, I see what they're saying. Yeah, they're right. I mean, I'm a member of something called the Texas Police Chiefs Association. Like most police chiefs, we lobbied hard against passage of this bill. And I'm not an anti-Second Amendment guy. I own guns. I mean, even if I were not a cop, but I do believe that if you're going to own guns, you have a responsibility to get training. You have a responsibility to undergo a background check before you do those things. And I just think that this is not a move that I agree with. But but I'm not an elected legislature, and I'm certainly not the governor. So that's the law. As far as issues that it's going to create for us, we're in Texas, and already, a lot of our contacts are with or on traffic stops. Already, assuming you're not a felon, which means you're not allowed to have a gun, assuming you're not engaged in any criminal activity, people could already carry firearms in their cars anyway. I mean, that changed quite a few years ago, that to allow them to carry them in their cars for self-defense or whatever. And so I guess the bottom line is our assumption when we're training our officers is just to assume that when you go on a traffic stop, if you're in a home on any kind of call, there's likely to be a firearm there. Now, if it's a call for service, our dispatchers are going to ask about, is there a firearm? Do you have one? Do you know if the other person has one? We're going to ask about those things, but we just make the assumption that in Texas, just about everybody's armed, and that's just the way it is, because even under the license, under the old provisions, we weren't allowed to, ask about those things or any of that. So I don't see this being a big change for us, but we are still looking at it hard and seeing, what kind of issues are going to come about because of this. And one of the other things too in Texas, people that are, before they had to have a license to carry, of course, but they could openly display their weapons, and that was for the handguns, but you didn't need anything. I mean, we have people, that would gather with their rifles and shotguns and, walk around at near intersections all the time. So, so we'll just have to see how this plays out. And, I'm sure a lot of people will take advantage of, I don't mean advantage of it in a bad way, but they like this and they're going to start carrying more. But so, we'll just have to see going forward if we need to make any changes in our training or our policies and procedures to deal with it.
I am a 31-year California transplant, and my mother is sitting here. Said everybody has a gun, everybody except, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, you may be the only exception in Texas. I kind of
and in my family. What is the criterion requirements for a police tower deployment as we are prepping and considering what we may or may not be doing for high holidays, whether it is pandemic related or crisis related of other things that are happening in the world?
Did you say a police tower?
Police tower deployment.
Okay, so you mean you wanted at where do you want it?
I don't know if we want one, but somebody asked me to find out what does.
Oh, okay. No, just call our crime prevention unit. Tell them you've got whatever event is going on, and we can bring it and put it at whatever facility, location, your temple, wherever you want it to go. Yeah.
Okay.
Synagogue, So is that what you're talking about, having it maybe at your synagogue?
I believe so. I'm guessing they asking what we're going to be doing for high holidays, and which are not till September, I think, and the middle of September this year. So they have a ways to plan.
No, yeah, actually, that's not a bad idea. So contact us and we can make that happen easily. Yeah.
Okay.
There's no cost.
Does Plano have a crime reduction plan like Dallas, targeted areas of high crime to even further reduce our crime?
Well, our crime rate, when I was talking about our crime rate in 2020 was 18.1 per 1,000 residents. Now, I know, you don't really have a reference on that, but I got to tell you, that is an unbelievably low crime rate. There is no, I'll put it in perspective for you. There is no city in America that's at almost 300,000 people that has a crime rate that low. So our crime rate is exceptionally low already. So we, now one of the things though that's really creeping up, we were up a little bit with our violent crime last year, is our violent crime is creeping up a bit, even though our property crime is still decreasing, even though more people are not at home as much and everything. We don't need as detailed of a plan like Dallas because we don't have pockets in our city where we have just really, really rampant crime or violent crime. We just don't have that here like they do in Dallas and maybe some other. I came from Amarillo. We had it a lot in Amarillo, believe me. But so our plan is just overall, we meet every month, once a month, and then we go over our crime numbers, and then we redeploy our forces based off what we need. And one of the key things that we focus on is when it comes to people who engage in gun crimes, where we can, we try to file federal charges on them, not state charges, because their cases are adjudicated a lot quicker. It doesn't take, months and months and months, or even sometimes over a year to get the cases closed out. They have to be done in 90 days, and many times they're done in 30 days. Plus, the defendants do a lot more of that time. They're doing about 85% of that sentence versus about 20%, 25% if they are sent in on state charges. And we're talking about guys that are shooters, guys that who actually engage in violent crime. We want them out of our community, and we want them out of our community for a long time. So that's one of the things. We've worked that out with our federal partners to do that.
Okay, somebody asked, as long as we're talking about crime, somebody asked, what is the difference between larceny and robbery?
Larceny is when someone steals from you without violence. So if someone breaks into your car without using force, I should say, if someone breaks into your car and steals your checkbook, your phone, you left it in there, your computer, that's a larceny. Larceny is also shoplifting, stealing from stores. So larceny is just simply stealing, taking something from somebody else, theft. Robbery is where you use force to take someone else's property. So either you threaten them with force, you actually showed them a gun, you beat them up and took their wallet, then that would be a robbery.
Okay, and burglary is larceny, same thing?
No, burglary is not larceny. Burglary is when you steal something from inside of a structure. So larceny would be if you stole something from a car, or if I stole your garden hose from your front yard. I didn't break into your house, that would be larceny. If I broke into your house and stole your stereo system, that would be burglary. So burglary, you would have to enter a structure for that to be a crime. And it could include the garage. So if you left your garage door up, up, and someone went in and stole your bicycle out of your garage, then that would be a burglary. If you left your bike on the front porch and they stole your bike, that would be a larceny.
Okay. Is there an education or community engagement plan to help humanize the police for our children and families? Whether it's in the synagogues, we had Officer Benitez, I believe it came a couple of years ago. But programs, whether they're in the cities or in the schools, I mean, the neighborhoods or in the schools, or is that something we can do as a congregation?
Well, we of course, in 2020, a lot of our community engagement programs, we had to cut off. They were by Zoom, and man, I love talking to you guys by Zoom, but I would much rather talk to you in person and see all your lovely faces in person. And there are some advantages to Zoom. Sometimes you can get more people available virtually than you can in person, but to me, it's just not the same interaction. And when you start talking about youth and young people, it is definitely not the same interaction. I don't know if they're going to have the patience to want to listen. I've done a couple of Boy Scout troops where I've talked to them, you know, young youth on Zoom meetings, but it's just not the same thing when they see you in person and you can high five with them and talk to them. So as we are coming out of this pandemic, and we did pretty good for a police department. We probably got about maybe 70% of our employees were vaccinated. So, but we're seeing our positive cases. You know, when we look at both our hospital data, we still get, the data on that. We are in very, very good shape here in Collin County and Plano and really all of North Texas, I think, when it comes to that. So we feel a lot better about actually going out and doing engagement face-to-face with kids and doing that. So, and, people have a particular program they want us to come to. They just, call up our crime prevention unit and we'll send those guys out. We have our neighborhood police officers in designated neighborhoods, primarily on the east side, some of them just west of 75. They also do those kind of activities as well as our SROs. But we have a program that we do in the summer, a vacation, summertime safety school, a week-long school. I think we do 2 iterations of that, 2 sessions of that, and each is a week long. Of course, we didn't do that in 2020. We're hoping to get that back up and going again here in 2021. We're starting a cops and kids program to teach these kids from low income areas. So we've got a daycare center over here on the east side, over in the Douglas community. It's predominantly African-American and Hispanic kids. We got a grant from Nancy Lieberman Foundation or Nancy Lieberman Charities. And so we're going to start up a golf program with these kids playing golf with some of our officers who like to do that, hopefully here in May. It'll be a 12-week program and then we'll start it again. And so, so we got a lot of different things we do to engage our officers with youth out there. We've got programs for older kids as well. We have a Citizens Police Academy class, of course, that hopefully we can talk about here, and I can invite some of you to. But we also have a youth police academy class. Again, we had to cancel it last year, but we hope to get those up and running again. And we do 2 sessions of those every year from kids that are, in high school age kids for that.
Okay. I would say something that my 3 kids, we talked about it earlier, is if people want to recommend to their kids or grandkids, is my kids for many years served the teen court program. And I was, they learned an awful lot about what you're not supposed to do as working as attorneys and in jury. There were a lot of things that a person didn't know. You couldn't go out for a walk at 1 o'clock in the morning with your friends. That's against the law. So there are things that I think, there are a lot of things we learned over 12 years in teen court. So it's
yeah, there's legislation though. I don't think it has passed everything yet that would restrict cities, not allow cities to have a juvenile curfew. Yeah. So that may be going away. I don't know. We'll see.
Ooh, there's a lot of community service hours that will not be served if that goes away. You touched on talking about vaccinations. Is there a requirement of in the police department that COVID vaccinations be taken?
No, we left it up to, we had an opportunity to get the vaccine early, like a lot of people in public safety, police and fire. And so we made it easy for officers to get it, but we didn't mandate that they get it at all. And now there were some consequences if you didn't take it, but I've lifted those just last week, I believe. So if you didn't get the vaccine, for most of 2020, we weren't doing much out of training anyway. Much of that was canceled. And even if it was going on, we didn't let our people go. We didn't let them go if they were going to be flying on airplanes and living in hotels and eating in restaurants. We just didn't do that. But probably starting around February, March, when we got the vaccines coming around, we decided we're going to start opening that up more. So if you were not vaccinated, then it didn't affect local training. So if they were going to go down to Dallas for training, we could call Dallas and say, hey, what are you guys doing for COVID? And if it looked good, we let them go. But we didn't let unvaccinated officers go to out of town training to where they were going to have to fly on an airplane or drive down someplace and stay in a hotel. But I changed that over the last week or two to where, because I think we're just at a point now to where that's not as relevant as it was before, because we're not seeing really the high infection rates in other places like we were before. So now,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, if or what mask requirement then is required of anybody who is not vaccinated?
Well, yeah, no. Well, our city had a, so if you had to stay 6 feet away from everybody, or if you were just walking around the building, you had to have your mask on. But that was lifted the next day after the CDC changed their requirements about vaccinated people in masks. And so we have good data on of our people who got the vaccine when we first started, because our city gave it to them. Our firefighters gave us the vaccine. But then we got to a point to where we asked everybody who wanted it. Some of them were still kind of hesitant. They want to see what was going to happen, and I guess see if our noses fall off or whatever if we got the vaccine. And so some of them may have gone out. Now you can go get the vaccine anywhere, and they're not required to tell us whether they've even been vaccinated or not. The only time they were required to do that is if they put in a training request to go to training, and if it was out of state or they were going to have to travel, then they had to indicate whether they were vaccinated or not. But otherwise, we don't know who's been vaccinated or anything like that. So
not vaccinated is not required to wear a mask. Nobody is.
Nobody at the police department or the city is required to wear a mask. What the manager put out is, our city manager put out that, or actually the HR director put it out last week, that they recommend that people still wear a mask, but it's not mandated. And so some.
Okay. How will the proposed anti-abortion laws be enforced in Plano?
That's out of my lane.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whose lane is that?
That's a good question. It's not mine.
Okay. I will research that and let you know. Richardson police officers told WFAA they are being forced to write more tickets or face punishment. I feel like the answer is no, but does Plano have regulations or recommendations about writing tickets?
No,
other than if they're deserved?
Well, what Richardson was talking about is the officer claimed that they were forced to write tickets. They had a quota. that is illegal in Texas. So I would be shocked if that was actually going on in Richardson. Richardson's a pretty professional police department. And so I would be shocked if that was actually happening. So we don't track tickets. We don't track the police department anyway. We don't track revenue from citations. Most of that revenue goes to the state. Some of it does go to the city. None of it comes over to the police department budget. So there's no reason for us to have to even do that at all.
Okay, if or what kind of training program is there for teenage troublemakers or teenagers trying to express themselves? Is there such a program?
Well, we don't have
Outreach?
Yeah, we don't have a program like that at the police department to to train kids. So I'm sure there are opportunities available, but it's not something that's coordinated by the police department.
Okay, how can the public be educated that we are equally responsible to de-escalate a situation the same as the police? De-escalation by mutual respect, respect through education and mutual engagement. Police officers who look like me patterning and other officers and respected local community representatives to educate and engage in our community.
Well, based off, it sounds like this person's definition of de-escalation, that's good. But what we don't, in other words, don't be part of the problem is what I took from your reading there. But if someone, there are so many different situations out there. I want to be careful on what I say. Generally, if you've got some kind of volatile situation going on between two people, you don't know them, and it's probably best you stay out of that and call the police if it looks like it's going to get violent or something like that. And if you've got someone who is getting volatile with you and getting angry over something that, you're not in a work environment, you can't leave work, obviously, but if it's over a parking spot or whatever, if you can ignore them and walk away and just get out of that situation, that would be the best thing that I would do. There's no point in escalating things these days, because we go back to the conversation that we talked to earlier. There's a lot of armed people out there, and there are a lot of people who can, there are a lot of things that can trigger them. I guess that triggering may be a bad word in this situation.
Exactly.
And you just don't want to be a part of that. It is really not worth it to get into a urinating contest with someone over a parking spot or a buggy in a store, or a shopping mall,
right,
something like that. It's not worth it.
Okay, this happens in my neighborhood regularly, or at least a lot lately, is the speeding and racing of vehicles at all hours, but late at night. Are police out there? Are you aware of it? The revving and noise of, he's going to get stuck at the red light anyway, so they're not really going anywhere faster. But
well, if there's late night racing going on, for sure, that we definitely want to know about it. Just call 911. Those problems are very difficult to curtail, because these kids, they're not going to stay at those locations long, because they know somebody's going to be calling, and so they're going to maybe do a run or two, and then they're going to go somewhere else, and go do it after that. But certainly call us and see, and we're looking at all kinds of, we've got drones, we've got other things that we're trying to look at to control this. We're hoping for some legislative help. One of the things, writing these guys tickets for these things when we can catch them is just not enough of a deterrent for these thrill seekers out there. What I want is if we can catch them engaging in either actual outright racing, or like in Dallas, they've been doing just taking over whole intersections and doing the burnouts. We haven't seen that in Plano, but if we can seize their vehicle, then that could cut some of this nonsense out, even if we could seize it just for a period and get it back. And there are some various legislation that's floating around out there, but I don't know if it's going to make it, because they are rapidly, obviously, running out of time.
well, I will tell you that Plano Parkway, Parker, and Windhaven Roads, Midway, for miles both ways, that area makes a lot of noise every night of the week. I have somebody saying.
And Deb, one of the things about that is our city is about 72 square miles, and our minimum staffing is 23 police officers, not counting supervisors. And so typically, if it's late at night after midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, that's probably about what we're going to have is, anywhere from, 21, 22 to maybe 25 officers to cover 72 square miles. And they're just not going to be everywhere. And then some of them are going to be more than one officer on a call for service or a wreck or whatever. And
All they have to do is drive as fast as the people who are going down Midway.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
72 miles quickly. Is there a way for a police officer on the ground to distinguish during a shooting between a terrorist who may be in a house of worship or a school and an armed citizen who is responding? How do they blink that safely?
Yeah, that's a tough situation as well too. And if it's a situation where some terrorists have come in and they've taken hostages, then we have one approach. If they're actually shooting at the time, then yeah, we train our guys to go immediately in, and they're just going to have to assess the situation as best they can and try to figure it out. Now, obviously, if the person that starts shooting at the officers, that's probably one we're going to shoot back at. If that starts happening. So
yeah, that's usually not the good guy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But we train on active shooter scenarios every year, during our in-service. And but it's training, trying to create a realistic situation and we train force on force. So it's not just we're talking about it in the classroom or, we have weapons that looks like are real weapons. They shoot. This is not a big goofy paintball looking gun. We're training just like we would, and those things hurt when you get hit with them too. So, and then everybody knows because you get marked up. So we train in a very realistic fashion to try to deal with those, but there's no way you can really create the noise and the confusion and the smoke and the screams that you get when this stuff really happens.
Okay, has somebody asking, what are your thoughts on Governor Abbott's decision to prevent cities from defunding the police, knowing the word defunding can be interpreted many ways?
Yeah, I mean, it's just something I don't think is needed. It's just from a philosophical standpoint. It just seems to me that cities are elected officials that we elect should determine the funding level of their police. And, I've looked at the bill, they've made some changes to it, and it's really, really, really complicated about going back to the time when you last de-annexed, land and added it to your city. But it's just something I don't think is really needed. And I'm not overly concerned about anybody defunding the Plano police. We get great support here, regardless of who gets elected to the councils. I just don't think it would be, any politician is going to come in on an agenda of defunding the police. But sometimes there are recessions, and they may have to cut back on and say, Chief, what programs can you give up? Because there's a recession. There's only so much money. And one of the reasons I'm hesitant about that is because I've been through that before here as an assistant chief, where we went through a recession in, like everybody did in 2007, 2008, 2009. Those were some really, really tough times. And we did have to cut back. We pulled officers out of our middle schools and some other things. And that can happen. I came from a city where Amarillo is not nearly as economically sound as it is here. And sometimes you may have to make cuts to do that. And as a chief, I realize that. So I guess the bottom line is it's great that they're trying to help law enforcement, but I think they need to leave that up to the elected officials that for each jurisdiction to handle that for themselves.
Voting is really important.
Voting is absolutely important, yes. Voting
is really important. Are there procedures to reinforce schools and synagogues during the holidays? How do you work with a congregation? We are right across from Plano West and close to Brinker Elementary and Renner. How does the police department work in cahoots with the schools and with homes of worship?
With the schools, during the recession, the Great Recession, and the officers we had in those schools, we split the costs of that with the schools. And for PISD, all of those middle school officers were pulled out. They were put back in about 2 years ago. Now Frisco ISD, we had one middle school at the time that was a Frisco school, and they just agreed to pay 100% of the cost, and they said, we want to keep our officers Plano ISD couldn't afford to do that, so we had to pull those officers out of there. But again, we've replaced those officers back. So now at all of our middle schools, high schools, and senior highs, we have at least one officer, and at the senior highs, we have 2 officers at each of those schools. For the primary schools, elementary schools, we have a partnership along with other agencies. It's not just Plano officers. You'll see these black and white little Ford Explorers that says PISD police or something on them. And then those are officers who are off duty, who are working in a secondary duty and working for the schools. And then they kind of they go back and forth from a set of primary schools, the elementary schools. They don't just stay at one because we've got so many of them. They just kind of make a loop and go check on those schools. So the schools here are pretty safe, and they do a good job. When it comes to our houses of worship, some of the bigger ones have hired officers, some for security, internal security, some for traffic direction, but we just have too many faith-based organizations. Synagogues, we've got at least 2 Sunni mosques, at least 1 Shia mosque. I think the Kurds have they're Sunnis, but they have a separate mosque. And then we've got Jewish synagogues, we've got all the Protestant churches, Catholic, and so we can't do that. So if houses of worship, faith-based organizations want to hire officers in a secondary employment, and if officers want to work that, we allow them to do that.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions that has not asked? I have run out. I take it back. There's one more. So Officer Beanies had come to Anchitor a couple of years ago when we started our Shoal Watch, our sort of in-house security team, not security, but interest team. And he came and talked about if there was a shooter, what to do and how to do. Is it possible to have something like that again? Are you still having that program? Is that something that's been or changed or? Right.
Yeah. And, having officers come out and talk about what to do with active shooters, of course, that was something that we were doing, very aggressively before COVID-19. So we dropped off. And so now, yeah, we certainly are at a point to where we can start doing those again.
Okay. I think this was something, I didn't see it, but it was the Best Neighborhoods program. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I'm not familiar with that terminology, but I know that both our crime prevention unit and we also have a small homeland security team that are trained on that curriculum, and they'll go out to faith-based organizations, businesses, schools, and put that training on to let them know how to do it. There's a set curriculum for that. And now that things are opening up, we want to do that. And this would be a good time because, the number of school shootings across the country just here in 2021. I mean, it's like every 2 weeks. I mean, there's another one someplace going on. And so, yeah, so that's something that we want to get back on and aggressively continue to push. And so we don't mind doing that at all.
Well, I'm glad Plano has as many houses of worship. God is watching, hopefully, all over the city and helping you guys out and your team. And on behalf of our congregation, I thank you and everyone who walks in and out of your office to help us for the effort and the hard work and the concerning care you give us.
Thank you, Deb. All right. Goodbye, guys.
I appreciate it. Phil?
Thank you. Deb, Chief, I want to thank you very much for doing this. It was a great program. I know I learned a lot, and I hope everybody else did. And I hope we get to see you again in the not too distant future.
All right. Hopefully we can do it face to face at some point. I can get to meet you guys in person.
That would be great.
All right. Okay, well, you guys take care.
Wonderful job. Thank you. Great.
All right. Bye-bye.
Goodbye now.
Everybody stay healthy and well and safe.
Thank you, Deb.
My pleasure.
All right.